It is hard to believe, but it has already been 2 full years since we started living full-time on the road. And we've gotten so used to just the daily rhythm of it that we actually kind of forgot that 2 years ago we had a really big decision to make.
That decision was whether to do Airbnb life or van life. Back then, it came down mostly to the numbers. And the fact of the matter is, we now have the numbers, the actual numbers, not the projected ones. So we can look at those and explain to you why we chose Airbnb Life. Probably the most common comment that we get from you guys is, why don't you guys just get a van? Why don't you just live in a van? You're traveling full time anyway. This video is going to answer that question, I think, pretty definitively and in a way that's going to shock a lot of you.
So first and foremost, what are we actually spending on our monthly Airbnb rental fees? This is just our housing fees, no other expenses included. 2 years ago, we projected on average we'd be spending about $3,000 a month on rent. But in fact, that number is lower because we still manage to boondock and camp for free here and there. We also have awesome friends and family that have let us stay with them for free. So if you average out over the full course of a year, we're only spending about $2,000 per month on our actual Airbnb rental fees.
Now, just to be clear, this is not saying that we only spend $2,000 a month when we rent an Airbnb for a full month. Sometimes we're staying in a place like Kauai or Mammoth or some other amazing place that's really expensive. And so it's significantly more, maybe $3,000, maybe even $3,500 sometimes. But because we do so much camping and staying with friends and family, and often also just cheap hotels in places that are, $60 a night and things like that, and we'll do that for 2 weeks in a place like Moab or something, it averages out to $2,000 in shelter expenses or $24,000 a year. So you might think, well, that $24,000 a year, if you were living in a van, it wouldn't cost you anything. So even if you got a $100,000 van, it's only going to take you 4 years to pay that off. And then after the 4 years, it's all going to be gravy. That's actually not the way it works when you run the numbers.
So the Airbnb costs are simple $24,000 a year. When it comes to the van life, there are extra costs that we have to factor in aside from just the cost of the van. So first and foremost, the cost of the van is not cheap compared to our Subaru, which we're currently driving, and I think we spent, $34,000 on our Subaru. To get a van that would work for us and all of our needs, it would be a lot.
Well, I'm 6'6", so that's already a huge barrier because we're looking at basically a Mercedes Sprinter van. Those are the only ones that accommodate someone of my height if I want to stand up while I'm cooking and doing that kind of stuff. And if you're living in it full time, you want to be able to stand up sometimes. And so a fully kitted out Mercedes Sprinter van at the time that we were looking at them was about $130,000. That is no joke. That is no joke. And you might think, oh, come on, you can probably buy a sort of a lightly used Sprinter for maybe 50 or 60 and just kit it out yourself. Well, no. It's maybe $30,000 just for the batteries, the fridge, the stove, the electrical, the plumbing, all that kind of, just for the gear, literally just for the materials. And then you have to get it installed. Now, you can do that yourself, but how many hours does that take, especially as an inexperienced person? I'm gonna guess 500 hours. If I make $100 an hour, that's $50,000 of my time. So honestly, it's probably cheaper if you add everything together just to pay the $134,000 to have the fully kitted out Sprinter.
Just be done.
It's gonna wind up being somewhere in that range, no matter how you do it. If you want a really, really nice van to live in, which of course we would, because we're working from that van. That's where you are full time. So initially, you got to say the van is $100,000 more than the Subaru. So that $100,000, that's your first number.
Okay, so let's do the math on that. If the van is $100,000 more than our Subaru, and we're spending $24,000 a year on the Airbnbs, we should just have to live in the van for 4 years. And then after that, any additional time we live in the van, we're basically winning, right? Not so, because we have to think about all the additional costs involved with owning that van and living in that van full time.
So the first factor that has to be considered is the price of gas. You guys know how expensive gas is right now, but gas is never cheap, especially in the California area where we mostly are. So we drive about 20,000 miles a year. In our Subaru, at 25 miles a gallon, that means roughly 800 gallons of gas. All right, it's a lot of gas. Now, in a van, and this goes for whether it's a bigger van, it could be a truck towing a trailer, whatever, you're getting way worse gas mileage than you're getting in a Subaru. So that same 20,000 miles, if you're getting 15 miles to the gallon, is over 1,300 gallons of gas.
Yow!
800 versus 1,300.
With current gas prices?
That is a significant difference.
All right, so that is already $2,600 extra dollars per year on gas if you're living full-time in the van. The next important cost is internet. For both of us, we work on the road, and so it is crucial that we have internet connectivity. We also just want to be connected while we're living on the road. So for us, internet is absolutely essential. And the good thing is most of our Airbnbs and hotels just come with free internet, so we are rarely paying for it. We do have a Starlink, which we can use while boondocking, and we have occasionally used it this year. But if we were to use it full-time every single month, it's $165 a month for the unlimited data plan.
That's very significant. We might use it for 2 months while we're boondocking, or sometimes your Airbnb internet will go out and we'll do an emergency.
It's happened.
Oh yeah, it's happened. And so we have it for emergencies as well, but that's very different than just having to pay for it every single month. It's really kind of an $1,800 a year expense if you pay for it every month. And for us, it's more like $400.
Maybe, I think even this past year it was less. We had really good internet this past
Yeah,
year.
we got really lucky with the internet.
Yeah,
but so that's a $1,400 difference every single year. The next important factor when you're living in a van full time is campsite fees. Now, a lot of people boondock a lot of the time, but that is not the easiest thing to do. I mean, you're out there in the middle of nowhere a lot of times. BLM land, sometimes you have to drive a lot further to get there. Sometimes it's much more convenient just to pay a campsite fee, especially if you're going somewhere like Yosemite, and so you don't have to drive 100 miles into the park from the nearest BLM campsite. And so even conservatively, I would say for us, we probably would have been spending around $500 a month on average just in campsite fees for national parks and things like that.
And that's conservatively, like, because we have tried to boondock quite a bit, and it's not easy. It takes a lot of extra effort, energy, maybe even extra gas mileage. Like you said, like sometimes you're driving really, really far, so then you're factoring in the cost of the extra gas. It's a significant chunk of change, I'd say.
It is. I mean, boondocking is super fun.
Yeah.
And I really respect the van lifers who do that for most of the time, but all of the ones we know, not only do they stay in campsites fairly often, but a lot of times they'll just be like, I just want a hotel for the weekend. Honestly, it's no one is staying in a van 365. They're just not. We've met a lot of these van lifers.
Yeah.
They'll tell you in person. I'm not going to name names, but they are not staying in the van 365.
No, they're not. They're not.
So $500 a month is very conservative. Even if you're just talking about a couple of hotel rooms and a couple of campsites, that gets you up to $500.
So there are also some smaller, more miscellaneous fees that don't seem like that much, but when you start putting them all together, they really start to add up. So you have to think about cost of laundry. We always have really nice laundries in all the Airbnbs that we've stayed in, which is really nice and convenient. Then you have to think about costs of black water dumping.
We just have plumbing, so our black water is dumped every day.
Gotta love plumbing.
Yeah, that's a good one, and that's about $50 a month as well. So $50 a month for laundry, $50 a month for black water dumping. That adds up over the course of a year. Also, it's just more expensive to insure a van than it is to insure a Subaru Outback. So even if that's, let's say, another $50 a month, it depends obviously where you live and what kind of insurance you get, but $50 a month is pretty conservative. So that's another $600 a year for insurance.
There's one other thing I want to add. As the primary grocery shopper of the household, I love a good deal. I love to buy in bulk when I can. Whenever there's a big sale, like Adam loves his cereal, and sometimes cereal will be like $10 a box these days. What is happening? But sometimes it'll be like, oh, well, but if you buy 4 boxes, you can get them for $2 each. We'll do that all the time. So those little costs really add up, which if you're staying in an Airbnb, we just load up our pantry and our fridge and we buy in bulk and we save a lot of money. You cannot do that when you're living in a tiny little van and your fridge is like yay big. So that's something to think about. Also, wherever we are, there's often things that you just can't get affordably. And so often I'll just kind of order cheaper things online to be delivered. It's really hard to get deliveries in a van unless you pay for pickup fees, which also add up if you're doing that weekly or, bi-weekly.
We've done that pretty often, actually. We have pick things up, and usually it's about a $10 fee. To go to the little local Mammoth Business Center or wherever.
Yeah.
So if you're boondocking, you can come into town and you can pick stuff up. But that extra $10 here, and like you said, the cereal. I mean, the Quaker granola that I like.
He's obsessed.
Oh my God. It's gone up and up and up every year. It really is. I think it's $9.99 for a box at regular price now.
How?
But a lot of times they'll do these sales where if you buy 4, you get the deal.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Vaughn's especially does that. They love to buy 4 of these.
Yeah.
And so maybe it's, salad dressing or Pop-Tarts or whatever it might be. But yeah, if you can store 4, you can really save money. So I would say we're saving, how much would you say? Like $50, $100 a month at least?
At least.
On groceries. It's a significant savings. So when you add together all these things that people don't really tend to think about when they're imagining the cost of van life versus the cost of Airbnb life, like extra insurance, campsite fees, extra gas, laundry,
groceries.
All this stuff adds up to over $13,000 a year.
It's pretty wild, huh?
$13,000 a year. That's more expensive when you're doing van life than when you're doing Airbnb life. Now, that still hasn't caught up to our $24,000 a year that we spend on shelter for Airbnbs, but $13,000, it's getting us there, and we still have 2 major factors left to consider. The number one major cost that no one seems to consider when they're thinking about van life is opportunity cost. In other words, there's a difference between the price of a Subaru and the price of a Mercedes Sprinter van. In our case, it would have been about $100,000. Now, that $100,000 is not just sitting there in a chest of gold coins buried in your backyard. That $100,000 would be earning you interest in some way. In our case, it would be in an index fund, and the average index fund over time earns about 7%. So that is an opportunity cost of $7,000 a year. If you didn't put that $100,000 into the van, that $100,000 would be earning you about $7,000 a year in an index fund. So you have to add that opportunity cost into the cost of owning a van versus the cost of Airbnb life. And the other cost that very few people talk about when they're thinking about van life is depreciation. Now, all vehicles depreciate. Even our Subaru, which has probably the lowest depreciation of virtually any vehicle, will probably depreciate on an average of about 10% per year. So if it was worth $34,000 when we bought it, it's been 2 years, so it went down to a little over $30,000, and now it's probably around $27,000. So it depreciates. Now imagine that depreciation when you're talking about a $130,000 Sprinter van. Even if we say 10%, and honestly, RVs tend to depreciate faster, but let's just go with 10%, which is what we're also saying for the Subaru. You're talking about $13,000 of depreciation a year.
That's a lot.
It is really significant. Really significant. And that's a real cost, because if at the end of it, you sell the van or you sell the Subaru, you're only getting back what you get after the depreciation has happened. So you have to factor that in. So when we add all this together, the cost of sheltering in Airbnbs and hotels for us is $24,000. And the cost of doing it in a van would be $30,000. In other words, and this is not even factoring in the $100,000 that it's just only factoring the opportunity cost on that, not the $100,000 itself.
Yeah.
But the idea that you're gradually going to catch up by saving $20,000 a year until you've paid off that $100,000 van, oh no, you're going to get further behind every year. Further behind.
That's so crazy because I feel like when we kind of ran the numbers in our head before we started living this lifestyle, it was like, yeah, but eventually probably, if we lived in the van for 4 or 5 years, it would probably start making us money.
That's the crazy thing, because that's what I was thinking too. I was like, when I remember I was talking to you about the Sprinter van, and I'm like, well, Elise, I know it's $134,000, but we'll pay that off if it's $36,000. I was thinking it would be $36,000 a year to do Airbnb Life. I'm like, we'll pay that off in like 3 years or 4 years. And then it's just going to be gravy. No, sir. No, sir. Oh. Not only would we not have paid it off, we would have been going further down the hole.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, this is not to say that van life isn't awesome. Of course it is.
Totally. Yeah.
And by the way, it's also not to say that you have to get a $134,000 Sprinter van.
Right.
I mean, you can just buy like a Ford Econoline that doesn't have a high roof and
But to counter that, yes, you could get a really cheap van to do van life, but you could also go way cheaper with your Airbnbs than what we're doing.
That's a great point, actually. If you wanted to go really cheap, you could do Airbnb Life for almost nothing if you just stay in rooms in people's houses.
$1,000 a month or something.
Oh, at most, if you stay in rooms in people's houses and stuff. We're doing really nice Airbnbs. And then boondocking or staying with friends and family. So yeah, you could do it much lower level in either case. So I think you could still, it's about what level do you want.
Yeah.
And we want a nice level with our Airbnbs, but we would also want a nice level with our vans. So that's why we did it that way.
Yeah.
But if you went lower with both, the same principles would still hold.
Yeah.
The same principles would still hold. Van life is more expensive than Airbnb life. It just is. So you have to really know that going in. You have to want the van life for the life itself.
For the experience.
Yes. Don't be thinking, oh, we're going to sacrifice and live in this really cramped space because it's going to help us get richer. No, it is not.
Right.
No, it is not. Not unless you have a really, really good YouTube about it.
That's a whole other story.
That's a whole other story. There's plenty of van lifers that are making it happen.
Yeah.
But the van life itself, that is not cheaper than Airbnb Life. If you want to do full-time travel, you might want to consider Airbnb Life.
All right, so that is our full breakdown. We hope it is now very clear why we chose to do more full-time Airbnb life versus full-time van life. Of course, we always want to know your questions, your thoughts on this. Honestly, full-time van life would be awesome. We still love boondocking. We love being full-time in nature, but when you really break it down, van life is not quite as sustainable as full-time Airbnb life.
One day, guys, when we're really fully financially independent, I think it'd be great to do both. Airbnb life in a Mercedes Sprinter van.
Oh boy, just go full extra on that.
But when you're still trying to save a buck and still trying to reach financial independence, full financial independence, Airbnb life is the better way to go.
We'll see you guys next time.
See you next time.